Joining us now is Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Let's welcome Frank Zaccanelli.
Live from the Real News Studios in Dallas, Texas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show. Your host, Frank Zaccanelli, has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events in the national news for most of his professional career. But what he and many others are really looking for is a place to find just the facts. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show.
Welcome live from Dallas, Texas on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show, episode number 5. And I'm really happy to be your host, Frank Zaccanelli, and very excited about the show. Talk a little bit about the analytics. We're getting a tremendous amount of support on the show. The numbers are growing every show, which is a very interesting analogy from a business standpoint. It's called proof of process. You come up with an idea and you test the idea, and ultimately the idea either makes sense or it doesn't. And proof now is in the pudding in terms of the viewership here and the people that are joining on to the To Be Frank Show. So I appreciate all the support that we're getting and all the pieces of the puzzle that are coming together. So today we're going to talk a little bit about sports and the effect of the coronavirus as it relates to the NFL, the NBA, all the major sports, but we're really going to concentrate on the NFL and the NBA today. And today we have a very distinguished guest, a gentleman by the name of Liffort Hobley, who has been involved in the NFL for a long, long time. He is the president of the NFL Alumni Association in DFW and Louisiana. And the great piece of that is that he's here to talk to us about the inside piece of the NFL alumni and the NFL as it relates to not only the coronavirus, but as it relates directly to Black Lives Matter movement. So that's going to be exciting, and he'll be on our show today. We're going to talk about some current events today to begin the show, as we try to do on every show. And there's a pandemic going on that's raging in our country that is inside the actual pandemic. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that people around the world now, this is not just the United States, now present company not included, but people who have been cooped up with their spouses and their significant others are literally pulling their hair out. And there just is so much television and movies you can watch. There's so much, puzzles that you can put together. And the interesting thing about it is people have been cooped up now for so long that you're starting to see some of the effects of those people being cooped up. Let's roll the tape, and I want to show you a real-life example of this.
California, day 12, being quarantined with my loved ones. At first it was okay. It was like a really nice long weekend. And then madness. It's too much togetherness. This entire experience has made me very much aware that I want a man in my life, just not in my house. Hook up my DVD player and my printer, maybe help me flip the mattress now and then get out. Yesterday, the man asked me where we keep the spoons. The spoons. For God's sake, we've been married 31 years. The spoons are kept where they always are kept, in the silverware drawer. He recently found all of the old cassettes of music that he used to listen to when he was in high school and thought it would be fun if we just listened to those songs yesterday. There's only so much of the band America a person can listen to. And that stupid song, riding through the desert on a horse with no name. It's not deep, it's stupid. I mean, name your horse, for crying out loud. Prickly Pete's a good name. Snoopy. Just name it and be done with it. I'm hiding in here because I don't think he can find me in here. The man can't find the spoons. Chances are he's not going to look in the closet for his wife. And if he does, I'm going to have to watch all 5 of the Planet of the Apes movies. I thought that would be a good time for us this evening. Oh, the horror.
Well, as you can see, the togetherness is really starting to catch up with everybody. Now, obviously, that is a tape that I found, and I laughed so hard. I thought it would be great to share on the show. People are really, though, connected in a way now that they really haven't been connected in terms of their families. If there's one positive side to the whole scenario with this, it is that people are spending more time with their families. Are there problems embedded in some of that? I'm sure. But I think that ultimately it's a really good thing that people are spending more time, and I think they've slowed their lives down, and hopefully that they're paying attention to the things that are important. But I thought that clip was definitely worth playing, so that's great. In terms of where we're at today, from a current event standpoint, this is really big. The Supreme Court has now ruled in the case with Donald Trump and his tax returns and his financial filings. And this is a two-prong scenario here, and it was a win-lose for President Trump. The win that he received today from the Supreme Court is that the congressional people on Capitol Hill in their committees who have subpoenaed all of these records are not going to be able to get those directly, at least not for right now. So that is a win, I believe, for the president. On the other side, the Southern District of Manhattan, which is subpoenaing and looking into his businesses and looking into all his financial dealings, has got now the green light from the Supreme Court to move forward and to not only obtain those records, but then to probably make those records public. Now, here's one of the things that I've had a problem with, and it's going to depend on where everyone sits on the political spectrum. I'll give you the arguments. The argument for Donald Trump not releasing all these documents and his tax returns is very simple. He's a target. He's been targeted for 3.5 years. People want to smear him. This is election politics. I mean, you can go on and on and on with this now. On the other side of the equation, I think that a tax return is very important in terms of understanding the business of a certain individual and his companies and his personal business. And for me, I'm in favor of public officials giving up their tax returns. Now, Donald Trump has mentioned over and over and over that he's not against giving up these records, just that, quote unquote, he's in the middle of an IRS audit. Well, I can tell you this from my years of being in business. Anybody at Donald Trump's level is in a 365-day-a-year audit with the IRS when you have as many businesses and when you have as many partnerships and when you have as much on the table that he has. So the question then becomes, why is he not just volunteering to give up these tax returns? Well, today, I think is set into motion now that the public is going to get an opportunity to be able to take a look at these. I hope that it doesn't become an election political scenario. I'd like for the election to be based on what people think about each candidate and what the merits of each candidate is. But you have to remember, this has been going on for 3.5 years. And so from my perspective, I think it's important when you're reviewing a person's history to take a look at their tax returns. I think that they're very important. So we're going to see how this one goes. I would think that the White House is not very happy with the ruling out of the Supreme Court today. Again, it was a win in the congressional committees, but it was not a win as it relates to the Southern District. So I think that that's something that we're going to have to follow, and we'll see exactly how all that plays itself out. In terms of other current events that I thought were really interesting, yesterday and today, let's take Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil. The guy was created by Oprah Winfrey back in the early days of his career, if you will. He obviously is in the give advice business, and Oprah, like she did with very many other people, made Dr. Phil a household name. Then he went on to kind of run his own show, and he's had a pretty successful show. But it was reported, and I want to make sure that I get this one right because this is problematic for me. It was reported that Dr. Phil and his company received $7 million, $7 million in PPP loans from the taxpayers of the United States. Now, I would assume that Dr. Phil is in a position where he's the last guy with the success that he's had with his show and the syndication of his show and everything else that he's done. This is the last guy that needs federal assistance. And this is where the whole program now, the facts are starting to come out. I mean, they showed that Tom Brady and his apparel company and his nutrition company received money from the federal government. Now, in case somebody's not paying attention, Tom Brady's wife makes more money than he makes. So if you take Tom Brady and Giselle together and you look at their net worth is reported to be over $600 million. Why are the taxpayers of the United States giving money to Tom Brady or Dr. Phil? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so, these are the things, again, I get back to the federal government is broke. Not broke from a financial standpoint, the inner workings of the federal government, the agencies of the federal government, they're broke. And you're going to read more and more and more about this now, about people that are receiving taxpayer money. The guy in Iowa is paying his taxes, and the money's going to Tom Brady and Dr. Phil. I don't think that there's anything that is right about any of that. And I think, quite frankly, people that have received this money need to send it back. Now, there's another nuance to the Dr. Phil thing that is even more disturbing than him receiving $7 million in government assistance that, quite frankly, he doesn't need. It's reported that his son bought a $10 million house recently in Beverly Hills. Now, when you start to put these facts together, you start to draw a picture that cannot be good for Dr. Phil's brand. You're taking $7 million of government assistance, and your son, who's your partner on the show, is basically buying a $10 million house in Beverly Hills. That's what's been reported. And it's a bad look. It's a terrible look because this assistance money needs to go to small businesses and people that need the money. And we're going to see, again, like I just mentioned, we're going to see more and more and more of this. So we're going to need to keep our eye, completely focused on this one because it's not the best. Okay, so coronavirus cases, you take a look on yesterday's totals, we're at 62,425 cases in the United States. 62,425 425 cases. Now, let me give you the arguments. Here's the arguments. They're all over the place. Well, the death rate's way down. Of course it is. Yes, it is. And I hope that we find out scientifically that that's a good sign. That, in fact, the virus may be weakening, that our therapeutics are really helping, but these numbers are astronomical. And remember the last show, Tony Fauci predicted, right or wrong, and I'm not a Fauci guy or not a Fauci guy, I'm just reporting the news here, just the facts. He said that if we don't stem the tide and get control of this, this could end up being 100,000 cases a day. I don't really care what the situation is. At 100,000 cases a day, we got a problem. So we've got to keep an eye on this. The disturbing part, the good news is the deaths in terms of percentage are down. The hospitalizations, though, are rising. And we're going to run into another situation in some of these cities and states where we're running out of beds and we're running out of ICU beds. And if that's in fact the case, that's going to be a problem that we've got to keep our eye on. All right, so we've got a bunch of stuff about Bubba Wallace that we're going to hit. And we're going to talk a little bit about the polls now. I think this is really important. And again, this show has a vow. We are not going to become political. But the latest polls have come out. And I think this is important for people to kind of understand these polls. Gallup poll has come out. And here's what really struck me about the poll. May 1 through May 13, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, had a 49% approval rating in the Gallup poll that was taken for that period, May 1st to May 13th. You add on now the spike in coronavirus cases, which is not helping the president, and then you take the George Floyd killing, Black Lives Matter, the riots, the aftermath. Based on that, June 8th to June 30th, which just closed out, his approval rating is now down to 38%. He's lost 11 percentage points. And I know the whole argument, so, call in, write in. The whole argument is, well, we can't believe the polls. The polls are never right. They weren't right 4 years ago. I think this poll is very telling to the Trump campaign that at some level now they have to figure out, they have to come to grips with where they're at in terms of their communication, not only on the coronavirus, but on the Black Lives Matter movement in general. I just think it's really important. And again, we've not taken sides here. The truth be told, and I'm willing to tell it, I voted for Barack Obama in his first term, and I voted for Donald Trump 3.5 years ago. So that tells you where I sit on the spectrum. I am in the middle. I am an independent voter. I hope that I can keep this show as independent as possible because people are sick of the politics. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out that some of these polls are very disturbing to the Trump campaign. Now let's go to Joe Biden. Joe Biden has not left the cellar in 4 months. And I'll be honest with you, the cellar, the basement, call it whatever you want. Cellar in my neighborhood, but the basement. Okay? Now he's left a couple times. He held one press conference. And you want to know something? Since he's not left the basement, now this show has information that we can't verify, but that Terry McAuliffe, the former governor of the state of Virginia, who grew up less than 2 miles from me when we were kids, and he's a friend of mine. And Terry McAuliffe, I believe, has still got a lot of room to do a lot of great things in politics. But the word that the To Be Frank show has gotten is Terry McAuliffe is standing outside the basement making sure that nobody goes in or nobody comes out. Now, that's unverified, but you get the point, okay? This is the weirdest, strangest election year for President of the United States in the history of our country. I mean, maybe back in George Washington's day, and maybe there's historians that can come up with stuff, but this is unbelievable. The guy hasn't left the basement and he's picking up points. I mean, to be honest with you, if I'm advising Joe, I'm telling him to go buy another lounger and don't leave. Get more satellite TVs and just sit down there, because that's what it seems like to me, is that based on these poll numbers, one guy is running the country but losing an incredible amount of steam, while the other candidate is basically not doing a whole lot. So we're going to have to see how all that kind of pans out. All right, so we're going to go now. I promised that on every show, we would talk a little bit about Chicago. In my opinion, I don't believe that Chicago is getting anywhere near the respect in the news media for what's going on there. I have promised that every show, a small segment is going to be on Chicago, so that we don't forget that innocent children are being murdered there every week. Roll the tape on Chicago.
Unbelievable. The month of June alone, there was a dramatic increase in murders and shootings. And when you look at this past week alone, murders were up 286% and shootings were up 193%. The head of the police union blames it in part on the mayor and low morale among officers. But the mayor says the problem is much bigger than that.
So here's my problem with all this. Barack Obama, who was president of the United States for 8 years, is from Chicago. Actually born in Hawaii, but he's from Chicago. He was unable to really stem this. Now, Donald Trump, I don't know what he's done or not done in terms of trying to figure out how you end this terrible scourge that is going on there. Obviously, it's all internal. It's gangs and related drug gangs and drug deals and everything else that is in a sector of the city of Chicago. If you go down on Michigan Avenue, you don't even know anything's going on. But you go to the west side of Chicago, it's a war zone. And my question last show, and my question every show, is why aren't more people who are worried about Black Lives Matter, which we all should be. We should say it and we should believe it. Black lives do matter. Why is there not more coverage and more protesting and more action as it relates to Chicago? And that's just a complete misnomer to me. Something else is going on, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, because the people of Chicago in these communities deserve better. Send in the National Guard, and I'm not picking on the mayor, okay? The mayor's doing what she thinks is right. Governor Pritzker, who knows what he's doing, okay? I don't know what he's doing. But somebody needs to take action here, and my advice to the Black Lives Matter movement is that they include things like Chicago and New York, because I think it brings a wider base to what they're trying to do. It brings non-African Americans in bigger numbers into the fold. So we're going to stay on the Chicago thing. We're just not going to let up on it. Somebody needs to explain to me what the hell's going on here. All right, we've got an update on China. China, okay? We got China. It's a mess over there in Hong Kong. You see what's going on. People are getting arrested. And now there's talk about the coronavirus actually spreading now in China. Now, everyone who's paid attention and watched this show and just paid attention on their own realizes that China has lied through their teeth about the number of cases and the number of deaths. The Chinese government, not the people of China are good. They deserve a better government. But the Chinese Communist government can't tell the truth. Roll the tape.
Allison, just when it started to feel better, when all of the restrictions that have dictated life for the past 5 months here were finally easing, it's all back. The temperature checks, the mass testing, the briefings to update case numbers. This time the outbreak is in Beijing, and it's triggering concerns of a second wave of infections across China. And it's also reminding people here that the coronavirus doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. Authorities are rushing to contain the outbreak, which is linked to the Xinfadi wholesale food market. This is a huge place that supplies about 80% of the city's food supplies, so they're taking it pretty seriously. At the end of last week, there were 3 cases that were linked to the market. Now that number is nearly 80, most of them employees of other food companies who had visited the market.
Okay, so you've just seen that clip. Now, based on China's past history, they say 80, I say 8,000, okay? I mean, these people couldn't tell the truth if the truth sounded better than a lie. But the fact of the matter is, we can't base anything on the numbers, but what you see there is that Hong Kong and now related cities inside mainland China are still dealing with this incredible pandemic. I'm going to make a prediction to you. A few shows ago, you saw the photo that I put up that showed the UK. And it showed like 9 million people on the beach, no masks, no social distancing, no anything. France is now opening up. Italy is now opening up. You're going to see a spike in all of those countries because it is in direct proportion to opening up that you will start to see the surges. Now, you could make a lot of arguments here, man. Was it right that we opened up the way we opened up in certain southern states? I live in Texas. It's not good here. You talk to people that work in the restaurants. You talk to people that own the restaurants. And to be quite honest with you, not a lot of people are following the rules, the 50% rule, the cleaning rules, and all this stuff. So none of this is going to stop until, as I mentioned last show, the United States gets a discipline that no one else, and we've not seen. All I've seen is completely undisciplined activities that are out there. And so that becomes a very major factor in where we go from this coronavirus. But China and then all of Europe, as Europe opens up, you can bet you're going to see increase in cases. Now, for Europe's sake and the people's sake, I hope that it's nowhere near where it was, 3 months ago, because they went through hell. So we're going to keep our eye on those numbers, but I think in direct proportion to opening up your country, I think cases are going to rise because this thing is incredibly contagious. Okay, so now we're going to get to our man, my main man. He's really, I probably need to send him a check because of the show, a box of cigars, something. Mayor Billy de Blasio. I started thinking a little bit about the clip that I'm going to play for you. And I started really thinking, what does this remind me of? Where in recent history does this clip of what I'm going to show you of the mayor who's under siege, and I'll get into some of these statistics in a minute. So what did this press conference that the mayor had, what did it remind me of? Roll the tape.
So I want to talk about what happened this weekend. We had a lot of people out there very peacefully celebrating our nation's birthday and spending time together with family and friends. But we also saw too much violence this weekend. And this is something that we have a lot of work to do to address. And it's directly related to all the dislocation that's happened over these last 4 months with the coronavirus. We particularly saw a concentration of shootings in Upper Manhattan, particularly in Harlem and Manhattan North Command. This is something we have to double down on to address. And it's not because of one thing. Let's be really clear. There's not one cause for something like this. There's a lot of different pieces. And again, the fact that the court system's not working, the economy is not working, people have been pent up for months and months, so many issues underlying this challenge. But to address it, it's not just one answer either. It's going to take a lot of different pieces. Of course, it's going to take neighborhood policing, which has helped us get so far. We're going to have to double down on neighborhood policing efforts in Upper Manhattan.
Okay, so here we go. So basically, the mayor of New York, Billy de Blasio, is blaming the complete mess that he created with the NYPD, the riots, the protests, and everything else on the coronavirus. This is what this man said. And y'all heard it. And I'm going to give you a few statistics in a minute. But here is the tape, when I was watching that tape, that it reminded me of. And I'll explain the tape for those younger viewers after the tape runs. Roll the tape.
Hey, you're coming from the right side.
We crushed the forces in Saddam International Airport, and we cleaned the whole place of the airport.
Baghdad Bob. Now, for those of you that don't know the story of Baghdad Bob, during the invasion of Iraq, which again, politically wasn't the best idea that we ever had as the United States. But in the removal of Saddam Hussein, we sent our troops in, and they came in from Kuwait, and they came in, through the air. And Baghdad Bob was the minister of information for Saddam Hussein. But yet his nickname was Baghdad Bob, the minister of misinformation. Well, the only thing that I could think of in listening to Billy de Blasio's completely ridiculous press conference was Baghdad Bob, because we got to now, I hate to say it, it's Baghdad Bob and now it's Baghdad Bill. This is just unbelievable. He wants to blame what he's done to destroy one of the greatest cities in the world on the coronavirus, because it's easy. Just blame Trump. Not Donald Trump's fault of what the hell just happened in New York. The police don't want to work for you. And let me give you a couple statistics about that, because this is scary. This is not something that is going to bode well for New York City. In the last week, 179 cops filed for retirement in the last week. And since May 25th, 503 NYPD police officers who dedicated their lives to keeping New York safe have filed for early retirement. That speaks volumes. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is all about the fact that you want to defund the police, which he's done. He's taken $1 billion out of the budget. And you want to get rid of, policing for the most part. You want to allow criminals to have no bail. You want to allow these people that have looted the streets to get away with this. And then you're expecting that people, because you've done nothing but completely, kill any morale that's in the NYPD. And what's happened here is that now you're in a situation to where the police not only have turned on you, now they don't even want to be police officers anymore. And so therein lies the big problem. But I thought that when I saw the clip, if you guys on your own go out and look at some of the clips of Baghdad Bob, they're funny as hell in a really terrible situation. Okay. I want to introduce our guest, Liffort Hobley. He attended Louisiana State University, where he played college football for the now national champion LSU Tigers. He was drafted in the 3rd round of the 1985 draft by the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were not smart enough to keep him, but he played 7 seasons for the Cardinals and the Miami Dolphins. He played for the legendary coach Don Shula, and he was on the team that was led by Dan Marino. As I mentioned to you at the opening of our broadcast, he's the president of the NFL Alumni Association for DFW and Louisiana. So it's my pleasure to introduce to the 2B Frank Show, Liffort Hobley.
Good morning, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing well, Liffort. I see that you're in the studios down there in the Carilli operation. They taking good care of you down there?
Oh, yeah. Jeff's always good. His group is amazing to work with. We love it here as a group.
That's terrific. So, Liffort, I've given your background. How did you become the president of the NFL Alumni Association, and what do those duties kind of entail?
Well, after living in South Florida for so long, I was part of the organization there. And when I moved here in 2001, I wanted to stay active. And not until 4 years ago, I was approached by the standing CEO, Beasley Reese, who's a good friend. We talked and he said, hey, listen, we need new leadership in Dallas. We want someone that actually has been involved and knows how the NFL alumni runs this organization. So I took it upon myself to be a part of that, and also I was elected in by my peers. And so far, after almost 4 years, I'm still the standing president. We've grown the organization, we've increased our membership, we've increased our presence in the Dallas-Fort Worth and Louisiana area, where people can actually see former players and what they're doing in the community.
So how would you rate, because I know a little bit, I was in the NBA for 5 years, I know a little bit about the NBA, but how would you rate the NFL in general about how they take care of their alumni? How would you rate that process?
Well, as we've actually gone through the process of a few collective bargaining agreements over the past 20 years, it has improved. We've actually created a great, I say we, when I talk about we, I say that this is the NFL and the NFL alumni and the retired players that are involved that qualify as such to receive benefits. So at this point, I think we're in a great spot. We're in a really good opportunity to basically increase certain things, also receive health care in certain situations where guys can actually go out and shop for health care, and then of course having systems like HRAs to basically resupply the funds that you invest in yourself as to stay healthy. So that's a great opportunity there as well.
Right. Well, what I learned in the NBA, Liffort, is that the involvement of the NBA to its former players, the quality of that is in direct proportion to the players of today speaking up about issues that are important to the former players, because they have a lot of influence with the league. I would assume that the NFL is similar to that the current players have to have a sense of respect for what was created for them, because like no other scenario that I can think of, and I'm talking about now across the business spectrum, have salaries risen from the time that you played to today at a higher rate in any business that I have ever seen. And you say?
I tell you, it's actually a competitive market. And to see the NBA, Major League Baseball, and actually NHL, hockey, have high salaries for players that are playing a sport as well as the NFL. It did take a long time for the NFL to reach this market. And as this market has actually improved over the years, past 30 years, each and every player to go out there and to, of course, risk life and limb to participate in professional football, they deserve every penny they receive. And I'm actually happy about what the market looks like today for the current players, because there are a group of current players that actually feel the need to actually continue to talk about how this organization started, how it's grown, and how to basically accept the responsibility to help the guys that paved the way.
Well, and it's their responsibility, and I'm happy to hear that they're doing it, but they got to continue to do it. And every new generation has got to take care of the prior, because they laid the groundwork. All right, let's talk about what's going on with the NFL and the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, this is not a paid political announcement, but I am not, just for one person, a huge Roger Goodell fan. And I'm not going to get into the totality of why I'm not and how I'm not. But there now is a lot of discussion, Liffort, that's out there. And I want you to kind of help us sort through it, about the effect that Black Lives Matter has now on the current NFL season. And I'd like for you to talk about those issues, including the decision to play what's called the African American National Anthem, and all of the details surrounding that. I'd like for you to tell our viewership from your perspective, and there's no right and wrong answer here, but from your perspective, how you see all of that correlating.
Well, if the players are actually asking for that, I'm on board with it. But if you're just throwing me a coin, basically just say, hey, we'll do this for you if you guys are actually do this, then of course it's a sour grape. Basically, so if the players are actually saying, hey, this is what we want, I'm on board with it. But if it's just the NFL saying, hey, this is what we'll do for you, it's not a good look.
Well, let me ask you this, though, Lifford, to get more specific. In the African American community, you can speak to this. Is the song that they are determining is the African American national anthem, is that widely accepted in the African American community as being such?
Well, I can't speak for every community. As a matter of fact, I can't speak for any community. I live in a mixed community, so it's one of those where I grew up in a community that was minority, total minority community out of Shreveport, Louisiana. And I can't speak for the whole group of Black Lives Matter or our entire race to say that that's the national anthem for every black person, because it's probably not.
Well, when I was in college, you'll get a kick out of this. I was a big OJ's fan, the OJ's, the group the OJ's. And people used to kid around, all my African-American teammates. I played basketball in college. And all my African-American teammates used to kid around that Stairway to Heaven by the OJ's was the African-American national anthem. Now, obviously, that was just a inside kind of thing between teammates and everything else. But I think that it has caught a lot of NFL fans by surprise, because they have never really heard that. And again, I'm of the opinion that if the NFL decides that that's how they're going to do it, then that's how they're going to do it. And then you're going to either reap or not reap the benefits of the viewing audience as it relates to that. I've taken, Lifford, a very hard stand on supporting Black Lives Matter. I believe it's important. And I believe that sports can be a tremendous vehicle to try to create change in our society because we need to have it. But at the same time, we've got to keep things on a plateau where we understand that we're in an entertainment industry. You know, there's some talk that's out there, Liffort, about the fact that the leagues have a tendency at times of trouble that they're now pandering. And one of the reasons that I don't particularly respect, if you will, Roger Goodell is the way that he handled this 2 years ago. I went on national television and I talked about the fact that, you know, I hope that everyone would stand for the anthem because of our military, but I respect the fact that people have the constitutional right not to. And so I think that this whole thing is really tied up in what is, quite frankly, a political war in Washington about, you know, an election year and everything else. What do you think?
Well, I look at this private sector of a business, which is the NFL. You had a group of employees that basically took a stand, and based on the information that, you know, that they were actually putting out there, I understand it. There's a lot going on in this country that's, you know, citizens aren't happy about, including professional athletes, where people are being disrespected, black people being disrespected by every opportunity, and well, I say in every opportunity that, you know, related to social justice, which is a social injustice for many, many years. So this opportunity that the NFL has to step up to do something that's going to basically not only get the players focused on the things that happen in their community, also the leadership in their communities. Like you mentioned Chicago. There's a lot going on in Chicago. There's a lot going on here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area as well. Some of those same things are happening. Kids are being murdered, police brutality, police shootings, basically. So those type of things were I would say the groundwork that was laid by someone like Colin Kaepernick to start this, to move this forward, where the Black Lives Matter organization has actually grown worldwide, where it's actually recognized by everyone. It's not just recognized in this country, but other countries. They basically saw what happened in Minnesota, and to see those things happen and unfold, it's basically just kind of, it sours your stomach, but it also opens your eyes. How many years this has been going on? So people are pissed off, and just happened that not only black people are mad, there's a lot of people out there that are angry, and they like to make things happen the right way and push this forward so it actually continues to stay in place where it's not just swept aside after about 6 months.
Right. Well, I'm going to spend a lot of time on this show making sure that it stays out there, and I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how the movement gets a lot of support from non-African Americans, because I think that's going to be the most important piece, Clifford. I talked a little bit last show about the churches. I think the African American churches and the non-African American churches, you know, can have some influence on being able to bring people together and talk about certain issues, because we can't be afraid as a society to talk about these things. So I'm going to really work hard to make sure exactly what you stated, that this thing doesn't just fizzle out, but there's going to have to be more throughput from non-African Americans in order to be able to really create the change. Let me ask you the last question. You played in the 80s and 90s. Did you experience personally any kind of racial overtones directly to you?
Well, growing up in a small town like Shreveport and going to LSU, going to LSU as an athlete, when you're at that level as a young man in a sport at a university like LSU, you're very seldom going to experience that because they hold you at high esteem. but I can more than likely guarantee you the neighborhoods around that university were minority black. And I could more than likely say that I saw a lot of experiences with other people in the community, and you frown upon it. It's not a good look. And you experience some of the things growing up as a kid in a community like Shreveport, Louisiana, because it's a small town, and it was a very, very awful racist town for a long time. And some of those things are still there, embedded in that community for many, many years. There's not a lot of change there. Baton Rouge was similar to Shreveport, but being an athlete, being a LSU athlete, you're protected from all of those things. You know, you're not involved. People aren't saying things to you like they're saying to just John Stevens that lives 6 blocks away from LSU. He's getting a different, that's different. So it's, basically, we're basically different because we can play that sport and we can help that university or that NFL team. So unless you are just a general guy walking down the street, and I can tell you that a lot of professional athletes probably get targeted because they are professional black athletes, targeted by police and stopped often, more than once, in certain areas, of course, and then of course the nice, vehicles and things that they basically tie themselves to, like myself, I did as well. So with that said, it's an opportunity for not just different races, but I think these the young ladies that put Black Lives Matter together and have grown this organization to an amazing organization, they wanted their voice to be heard, but they wanted the organization to be done and used with the respect that they actually built for it.
Well, we're going to do our best on this show, Liffort. I can promise you that, to try to figure out how to do that. So I really appreciate your time. I appreciate what you do in the community. And everyone who's watching the To Be Frank show, follow Liffort Hobley, and you'll follow his work that he does with the NFL alumni. And Liffort, thanks so much for being on the show, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Frank, for having me. I deeply appreciate it.
Okay, Liffort. All right. So there we have a guest that ultimately has lived it and seen it. I'm not a big Roger Goodell guy, and the reason is I think now he wants to jump on board and he's going to say all these things, and I think there's a deep hypocrisy, surrounding that. So we're going to have to see how a lot of that plays out. In closing today, I think that the message about the show today is that we are a country that is absorbed with sports. It's a huge part of our pastime. When you take a look with all the sports that we have here in the United States with, all the major professional sports leagues, added now soccer, all the sports participations on the university level, both in basketball and football and women's sports. Sports is a major, major piece of the fabric of society because it is probably the #1 entertainment vehicle for the United States of America. A lot of people now, the last 3 months are in withdrawals because no sports being played, no sports on television. And, that led to basically, that woman going into the closet that we started out with. Not really, but, as a humorous side to that, people are looking for the outlet of sports to come back. The question is it going to come back? The NBA, I can promise you, is struggling now with the launch of, quote, the bubble down in Orlando, where they're going to send everybody to one location. You can't leave the location. You're going to be in the location. You're going to play the games. You're going to eat. You're going to sleep. I don't see that that's a done deal yet. I just don't. And there are players that are opting out, and they're opting out at a pretty significant rate. So we're going to have to keep our eye on what's going on with the NBA. In the NFL, I think people are going to get up on top of their houses and threaten to jump off if they don't have NFL football, come September. The question then becomes, can the game be played safely? And, football is a contact sport. Basketball, they don't call it a contact sport, but it certainly is. Just watch a game. But, are we really going to have football? I don't think that there's going to be fan participation in any sport before early next year. I just don't see that that's going to be possible. You got to take a look at college football now. I mean, that is so huge in parts of the country that people live their whole lives around it. Are they going to be able, to have that piece of the viewer scenarios that are out there in terms of going to the games and tailgating and all the stuff that has been a very important part of their life? Are they going to be able to do that? I say no. I say that all of this is really still up in the air, and is especially in some of these southern states that have had massive breakouts. Now, all the people in the blue states, if you will, that didn't open up. Once you open up, you're going to have somewhat of the same problems. Hopefully, they're not going to be as bad as what we're seeing in Florida, Texas, Arizona, and California. But at some point, you got to open up your economies. You got to open this thing up. And what we hope is, the hope is back to what I said about 20 minutes ago. Is the virus weakening? Are the deaths coming down as a percentage because the virus is no longer as deadly maybe as it was at its outset? We got to figure these things out. We got to find out, is it therapeutics that are keeping people from dying? That would be great if it was a combo platter of all of it. Nobody wants to see this thing go away worse than me. So I think that the sports side of the equation, which was the theme for today's show, plays a gigantic role in our society and everything that we do here in the United States. And I hope that we get ourselves into a position where we can start to get back to enjoying these basic fundamental things as Americans again. And I know I speak for the people of Europe. They got soccer going on. They can't even go to the game. So we speak for everyone around the world. Follow us on Twitter, the 2B Frank Show, Twitter. Follow us on YouTube, the 2B Frank Show, YouTube. Follow us on LinkedIn, the 2B Frank Show, LinkedIn. And follow us on Facebook, the 2B Frank Show, Facebook. This has been a great time that we've had. I enjoy doing this show, and I hope you enjoy it. We'd like to hear from you. And until Monday of next week, we bid everyone a safe and hopefully very, very productive weekend. Signing off, it's Frank Zaccanelli. Have a great day.